What's a good argument, and how can we make one? The content I learned this week for Praxis Month 4, Week 2, was about critical thinking and argumentation. I learned the structure for what an argument is, what it's made out of, and then a list of different fallacies, ways that people misuse arguments. So I'm going to go through the concepts that we covered, what arguments the author gave, what ideas were new to me, what questions this content brought up, whether this content changes the way I think about the world, how I can use ideas even if I disagree, and what connections there are between the ideas I consumed this week and ones I already knew. So the most basic thing I learned from this content was the argument structure. Basically, arguments are made out of claims, which are statements about, what is the case. So if I say, it's snowing outside, that's a claim. I'm making the case that it's snowing outside. And in order to make an argument, I would need further statements backing that up, further claims backing that up. Claims like, I read it on the Weather Channel, that it's snowing outside. That's another claim. I made the case that that's what I did, I read it on the Weather Channel, or I saw the snow outside. So that would be another claim making the case that I know it's snowing outside because I saw it. Now, whether or not those claims are true is, that's part of the argument, is making the case that your claims are true and giving evidence that backs that up. But that's the basic structure of an argument. And the claims that are used can be true or false. The basic idea is that claims are true or false regardless of when they were made, who gave them, and, they're just a statement. A claim is just a statement. And it doesn't have anything besides what it says on its own. You have to give further premises to back up each claim that you make. Fallacies are when someone either wants you to believe a claim or does not want you to believe someone else's claim. And they use argumentational fallacies, these structures of argument or ways to misconstrue one of the premises that will tip you as the audience in whether or not you want to believe their claim or not believe someone else's claim. These fallacies can be emotional, using something like, you should be upset that he's making this claim. Instead of actually giving reasons why the claim is wrong, you should be upset about this claim. And that's one of the ways that emotional fallacies tip you, they would be against that claim. Another fallacy is the fallacy of popularity, which says basically, very famous people or a lot of people like you, accept this claim, and therefore you should too. Instead of actually letting it stand on its own as a claim, you used the popularity of the claim to cause other people to believe it. This is closely linked to the fallacies of tradition and common practice, which say, because you've always done it, we should continue doing this, or because it's common practice, everyone does it, we should accept this claim. Another fallacy is the fallacy of two wrongs making a right, which is often used when someone is wronged, to say, here's my premise, I should be able to hurt people. Here's my claim, I should be able to hurt people. Here's my premise, because they hurt me first. Which is not logically sound, but is very often used for people to rationalize their own revenge-filled decisions. A way that people use as a fallacy to distract you from an opponent's argument is to use a red herring, which is basically bringing in a premise that doesn't directly relate to the case, but is going to be kind of flashy and distract you from the case that's actually being made. So I say, I would like to have some more candy today. And you say, well, did you hear in the news about that person who died of overeating candy? It still has candy in it, so you can say it's related, but that's a red herring. You're throwing that person off of their argument by bringing up something that's going to shock them and kind of take them away from the actual point that they were making. Another tactic is the smokescreen fallacy, which is when you have a premise have a claim and you keep bringing up new premises very quickly, kind of without regard to whether or not they're true, with the sole aim of distracting your opponent, basically throwing up a smokescreen of new claims and arguments in order to make it so that they can't respond to you. A whole section of fallacies are devoted to personal attacks. You've probably heard them. You shouldn't listen to this person's claim because of that person, because, you know, that person's a drug addict. That person is a mean person. Therefore, nothing they say can be trusted. When, in fact, the point of bringing up a claim is so that that claim itself, regardless of whether it's true or not, can be kind of put out there, and you can see what backs it up, regardless of who brought it up. But it's very popular to kind of use personal attacks, saying that person's not good, that person's inconsistent, they say they believe this, but they didn't believe it earlier, therefore we shouldn't believe this. That person told us not to smoke, but they smoke, so that means that whatever they say about smoking shouldn't be believed. Or that person, you know, is telling us how to stay out of jail, but they've been living in jail, so they're in a circumstance where we shouldn't listen to what they're saying. And a lot of these fallacies can reasonably have you say, all right, maybe I'll be more skeptical of whether or not I believe that claim. But the claim itself, the true or falseness of it, is not affected by the circumstance of the person, how consistent they are, or their how they are personally. One of the reasons people bring up personal attacks is part of the poisoning the well fallacy, which is when someone's making a point and you distract from that point basically by poisoning the well, bringing up things that might be true or false about them that are going to shock their audience and make their audience stop believing that person, or lower the reputation of that person. Another section of fallacies actually attacks the claim itself. The genetic fallacy says we shouldn't accept this claim because it originated in a time that we, generally don't agree with. So you might say, we shouldn't believe this claim because it originated in the time of the Holocaust. Even though that claim might be true or false, good or bad, standing on its own, it's not an argument to say it originated in a bad time and therefore it's a bad claim. Another is a straw man, where you discredit an argument by blowing it out of proportion. Let's use the candy one again. Someone says, I want to eat a lot of candy. Someone says, I'd like to have some candy. That's just their claim. That's what they want. And you say, I can't believe you want us all to go out and get you a bunch of candy so you can get really fat. And that's just a big exaggeration of what they were saying, but you use it to say, we shouldn't accept that claim. That's ridiculous. That's a straw man fallacy, because basically you're putting up a straw argument in place of theirs and then blowing that argument away. Then some fallacies that deal with the structure of an argument include the false dilemma, which is saying we only have two choices. If you choose this one, you reject this one. If you choose this one, you reject that one. And it's used to polarize an issue and usually encourage you to choose one over the other. So you'd say, support this candidate or you're racist. You make those the only two choices in order to make people support that candidate, because nobody wants to be racist. But it is a fallacy because those aren't the only two choices, Maybe you can support him and be racist, or you can support someone else and not be racist. That's a false dilemma, which is also used with perfectionism. Either we should adopt this when it's 100% perfect, or we should reject it completely, instead of taking into account that it doesn't have to be 100% perfect in order for us to accept it. And the fallacy of line drawing, which is often used when you have something that's kind of on a scale. Here's very bad, here's not that big of a deal. And they say, show me the line. Your issue is here in the middle. Show me the line. Is it really good? Is it really bad? And, or is it a big deal, or is it a small deal? And you have to show me that line before I can make a decision on it, instead of making a decision on the claim as it is. The slippery slope fallacy is one that basically makes a lot of false connections in the premises. So someone else has a point, I want to have some candy. And you say, wow, once you start having candy, you'll be having candy every day, you'll be eating it instead of meals, you'll be getting sick, and you'll getting fat, and you'll die of obesity. So what you're saying there is, if we accept your claim, you have candy, then you will die of obesity, which are obviously not connected, but the slippery slope fallacy links all those premises in order to give a false conclusion. And if you can disprove any of the premises in that string, you can disprove the conclusion and knock out that argument as a fallacy. The last fallacies that we learned about were the arguments to ignorance, or which the argument to ignorance is related to the burden of proof, which is talking about whose responsibility is it to prove a claim. If I make a claim, then it's my responsibility to prove that claim. The argument to ignorance says, I made this claim and you don't know if I'm right or not. You didn't disprove me. That means that my claim is true. It puts the burden of proof on someone else to disprove you before you can know if your argument is wrong, instead of understanding that the burden of proof is on yourself to prove your own claims. And lastly, circular reasoning, or begging the question, is when you take a claim and you support it using the same claim. You say, tuition should be lowered because students should be paying less for college. Which is, that's the same argument. You're saying tuition should be lowered because tuition should be lowered. And that's circular reasoning, which is also called begging the question, because the question that it begs is, what information, what premise are you actually giving me that's unique to the claim, which would allow me to believe your argument. Those are the fallacies the basic ones that we went through, talking about how people use bad arguments to sway you towards your decision or away from someone else's decisions, from someone else's claims. The arguments that Dr. Sadler, who gave this talk that we were all listening to about the fallacies and arguments, used were pretty similar to the ones I just gave. He used logic and a lot of examples. The ideas that were new to me was the actual structure for using claims and stacking more claims on top of it to create an argument. I hadn't heard that before. The new questions that this content brought up for me was, first of all, is everyone capable of understanding these argument structures and the fallacies? And if not, is it actually beneficial to teach them? Because if not everyone can understand them, then we have two groups of people who can understand them, people who can't understand them, and they might not be able to communicate to each other because the people who are understanding the structure will be very legalistic about it. Oh, you're doing an emotional fallacy right now, and the person who's making that emotional fallacy might just be making their argument out of what they feel, a very common sense sort of argument, and they wouldn't understand necessarily why it's not being accepted. So that's the biggest question it brought up, is this style of structuring your arguments really going to be beneficial in the real world where there's people who might not know it? This content changed the way I think about the world because it does provide a structure for breaking down other people's arguments or breaking down the presentation of one's own arguments, which, changes the way I take in information to see what arguments are they making, what claim are they trying to prove. How can I use these ideas even if I do disagree on whether or not it's beneficial to learn this or to teach all of these structures and fallacies? It still does allow me to see why and how people hold their stances. Are they holding it from an emotional standpoint? Are they making an argument from emotion? Are they holding their positions because they don't like someone else who holds opposite positions? Are they making, an ad hominem personal attack against that person? Or are they making a logical argument, even if it's from common sense? So just understanding, what categories they can go into can help you understand more arguments from different people. Finally, what connections are there between the ideas here and ones I already know? I can't think of any specific connections besides the fact that I did learn a lot of these fallacies in debate class, and I do not believe that I learned the kind of basic argument structure of a claim and a lot of claims as a premise to support that one claim. So that kind of brings it back to frame what I learned in debate and the fallacies that I learned for an argumentational style to kind of understand the basic statements that make up an argument. So I hope that you've learned something from all of the different fallacies and argument structure that I've gone through today. What do you think about whether or not this should be taught to more people at a younger age in order to increase the amount of people who have this structure for how to form an argument? Do you think that should be expanded, or do you think maybe more people should be just, living what they believe and kind of having a common sense view of the world instead of breaking everything down into small pieces? Who knows? I don't know. I'm going to continue thinking about that and forming arguments. So, thank you for watching.